Well, the best kept secret in the Northwest. We would like to introduce you to our #1 pick in the supplemental, Brian Bosworth.
The first thing I'd say about the Boz is that he was two distinct people. I mean, there's Brian Bosworth, the person, and then there was the Boz.
Here he comes. Number 44. Listen to the crowd.
The Boz was this larger-than-life character, this guy who knew how to merchandise himself, this guy who had the haircut and the earring and all the things that he brought with him. And then there was Brian Bosworth, who was actually kind of a quiet guy, a hell of a football player, and a guy who was a good teammate to those on that Seahawks team.
There was two different guys, there was the Boz and then there was Brian Bosworth, and Brian and I were good friends. Yeah, he was just a regular person, and he had a great sense of humor, and as a matter of fact, we used to get in trouble quite a lot because we were always making jokes and laughing, and we got along great that way.
I am ecstatic about being here in Seattle.
Because I was drafted in the second round and it's supposed to come in here to replace Keith Butler, and I found out that the Seahawks got him in the supplemental draft the day of my graduation from Stanford, the morning of, and so it kind of ruined that for me a little bit. All of a sudden, the best linebacker in the league gets picked in the supplemental draft, so I thought, we'll see how this goes.
Then came the Boz. The odds were astronomical, but Seattle won the draw in the supplemental draft, sending Brian Bosworth to the Seahawks.
First of all, you had to understand that every team in the league had a shot at getting him, because it wasn't the draft, it was the supplemental draft. And so by virtue of your finish the previous season, if you were a team that was lower down the scale, then you had more opportunities to pick him than the teams who finished real high. Well, the Seahawks got the opportunity. They were the one pulled out of the box to say, okay, supplemental draft, you have the shot at Brian Bosworth. Mike McCormick, I think, did what every single general manager in the league would have done. They said, absolutely. I mean, this guy was an All-American. He was as good a linebacker at that time as there was. He made plays all over the field. It was a big moment when the Seahawks got him in the supplemental draft. And it was an even bigger moment the day that he arrived. They flew him in a helicopter and brought him into the practice facility. So it was exciting for the city. I mean, the city really jumped on it. They embraced it. The team, they said, listen, this guy's a football player. And all right, let's get going.
I was visiting with Mike before. I thought the defense played very well. I was real impressed with Dave Wyman. I had a chance to play against Dave about 3 years ago.
When he finally got to camp, I think he flew in a helicopter, and I arrived in a 1982 S10 pickup truck, so it was kind of different. We were different kinds of guys, but then they made us roommates, which I thought was particularly cruel that they make him my roommate. But we just started talking football, and after about 2 or 3 nights of staying in the same dorm room, we had a lot in common. So yeah, we ended up being fast friends.
But then coming through and making a big hit is Bosworth for the sack. Brian Bosworth makes his first sack in the NFL.
Let's face it, we were all pretty boring up to that point. Jim Zorn, Steve Largent, they were the stars on the team for the first decade or so. And those guys were blanded in a glass of milk. So to have a guy like Bosworth come in, unbelievable.
You'd see little baby Bozes all over the place, and with the mullet and the colored hair on the side.
It was just so different. And I can't tell you how many people came down wearing Boz type outfits with his jersey on and had their hair, the fade and the stripes and up in the middle, and just wanting to be like him. I mean, it was amazing that in just a fairly short period of time, he had that kind of impact on the 12s. And then with a guy that was as hard-nosed as Chuck Knox. To have him playing for Chuck, I mean, Chuck had to kind of swallow hard a couple of times and okay, this is this guy. But Chuck knew he could play.
Well, he adds what he can do, and that's the bottom line. He's strong and he can run. and he makes contact with people. But obviously, as Brian said, he's got to come do it now. I mean, all the hoopla and everything else is out of the way for the time being. And we're in training camp, boot camp, so to speak. And, you've got to let what you do on the field speak for yourself. And that's what he wants to do. And we'll go to work out here and see what happens.
Well, I'm talking some kind of pursuit from Brian Bosworth. With those two guys, Bosworth and Fred Young, inside at linebackers, I mean, there is no real open area you can run. Brian Bosworth and Freddie both can chase you down from sideline to sideline.
When you get in the NFL, I mean, I don't care who you are off the field, but in the room and on the field and everything, you're just another guy. So, all of that hype and everything, that was for outside of the building.
A game that involves 22 players, and I got to go out and earn a starting job. I've got to go out and earn the respect of my teammates. And the biggest thing that I have to keep in mind is I'm just like all these other guys around here, and I don't look at it in terms of my dollar signs are bigger than anybody else's. I've got a job to do just like everybody else does, and that's my biggest and main concern.
Oh, Bosworth just stood him up. Brian, a nice shot, hit him right square in the chest.
I think the expectations were pretty high for him, and that's the part I think that where, near the end, I think it was tough because they expected a superhero, basically. I'll tell you this though, and this doesn't get said enough, his rookie year, he played his ass off. I don't know if I can say that.
One man misses him. Hurd circles out around the left side. Grabbed by Bosworth and thrown down at the 45-yard line.
He was good. I mean, I remember him. He got a few sacks. One of them, the quarterback from Kansas City, I remember he got up and he had a bloody face because Brian hit him so hard. He picked up a fumble and almost scored a touchdown. I mean, he played really well his rookie year.
He was bigger than his frame meant he should have been. But because he was so bulked up and still kept that speed, those quick feet, he could make plays in the backfield that a lot of guys couldn't make. And then he could take on big guys at the line of scrimmage that maybe you wouldn't have thought he would be able to do. He could run sideline to sideline. But then he could be in the backfield in a heartbeat before the center could get out of his stance. He was a terrific football player. The problem for him was his body just gave out. I think it was his shoulders first. And that's what comes with that kind of career of banging into people. Brian Bosworth came in and drilled him right in the numbers. Yes, he was an excellent football player for as long as his body let him be. But he was that character when he needed to be, that personality, that Boz, that guy who broke the rules, that guy who sold T-shirts in Denver, talking about John Elway as the quarterback of the Broncos. He was the one that had those shirts manufactured and sold in Denver. That's chutzpah. He was remarkable that way, and he knew how to market himself. Did a very good job of that. Had he been able to play just a few more years, who knows how big he could have been.
The Bosworth book, which we're not in the business of promoting anybody's book, but it did cause, as many people know, quite a furor here in Denver.
We're in Denver, and offensive linemen usually stick together, and there was something about, he wrote in his book, something about offensive linemen, how they can't dress, and they're kind of dopey or something like that. Well, the offensive linemen didn't like that. So when we went to Denver, they went up into the stands and bought these T-shirts. They were called Boz Buster T-shirts, and they put them on, and then they came parading past our locker where we were sitting. And he goes, "Those guys are putting money in my pocket." And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, those are my T-shirts." So he was selling T-shirts. He was gonna, like I said, he's gonna profit whether you loved him or hated him. And it was particularly funny when the offensive linemen found out that they actually were buying his T-shirts.
I could care less if people in other cities hate my guts. I thrive off that. But when I come home and I'm playing in the Kingdom, I want to hear the support of the fans, and that's the thing that I thrive off more, is the support at home, and secondly, the support of the hatred from other opposing teams.
Brian Bosworth, who got a A lot of boos when he was introduced tonight. They just announced Bosworth's name as making the tackle, and he gets a Bronx kind cheer. Of a fun greeting.
When he became the Boz, he kind of clicked on and became, you know, sort of who he should have been, because he put himself out there. I don't care if you love me or hate me, just as long as you're paying attention to me. And in Bosworth's case, even if you're buying anti-Boz t-shirts, that's a good thing, because those are my t-shirts and I'm going to make money off of you because you hate me. So it was fairly brilliant. I think, you know, he was probably the only guy at the time that was doing that. And some of it came from his agent, Gary Wishard, but I thought a lot of it, Brian is a very creative person, and I just had never seen anybody do that. You know, you try to be low-key as a football player and, you know, not make people hate you too much, but he loved that part of it.
I seem to remember that every time you walked into an opposing stadium, you'd see, you know, Boz with, you know, the international circle, a red circle with Boz and then the slash through it. You'd see those all over the place. And it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't have them made up and put them in those stadiums. And the same with the t-shirts, because he was marketing himself the whole time. It should be no surprise to anybody that became a pretty good actor. You know, he's been in any number of motion pictures and commercials, because he would probably tell you, yeah, I was kind of playing that part the whole time, even though he would say I was a pretty good football player probably. But he knew he was playing a part, and he went on to do that in his life after football, and good for him.